Support for the Scouted Football podcast is brought to you by Manscaped, the best in men's below-the-waist grooming. Manscaped offers precision-engineered tools for your family jewels. Manscaped is trusted by over 2 million men worldwide. Join the movement for all your below-the-waist grooming needs. Get 20% off and free delivery with the code SCOUTED20 at manscaped.com. Hello, Scouted Football Pod fans. Interesting times that we live in, aren't they? A little bit of a pivot from our usual under-23 football chat this week, but with the news that 12 clubs are breaking away to form the Super League, we thought that it would probably be best to discuss the only topic that's being discussed in football at the moment. We did have a normal episode planned this week, but discussing any other aspect of football did feel a little bit like rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic, as the saying goes. But I've managed to scramble my trusty Scouted colleagues, Phil Costa and Stephen Ganavis, for this one. Usually found on the Scouted Patreon pod, but it seemed as though to discuss football behind the paywall as it is, then I think it would be only fair that we discuss this on the normal pod. Steve, Phil, how are we both doing?
Yeah, good, mate. It's a bit sad to be coming on and discussing this topic, but I'm hoping it will be quite cathartic for me and for you guys as well. So let's see.
Yeah, from the other side of the world, it's pretty sad to see, these things take place, especially, football clubs are supposed to be a social good, and to see 12 clubs that, sit at the heart of their communities, essentially, becoming franchises if they weren't already becoming that way. It's a sad time for the sport. So yeah, it'll be interesting to delve a little deeper into what's happening.
Yeah, it does feel as though sort of football has effectively eaten itself. The greed at the top of the game has got to a point of no return, and that the constant commodification has turned into a product which is no longer viable. And clearly, the powers that be at the 12 founding clubs, as they liked to be known in the Super League joint statement, kind of reflected that. And I think for me it just seemed very brazen. And at the beginning, when the news broke, I thought this is probably going to be used as leverage. But they seem to be really in every aspect, and I'm not just talking about sort of the macro aspect, in every facet of what they're doing, how they're operating in the past few days. It just does appear as though they are all pushing ahead with this plan, which it seems very difficult to comprehend, really, because it's a seismic shift in the fabric of the game that we haven't seen, in forever. We think of these teams, Liverpool, Manchester United, Man City, Chelsea, Tottenham, Arsenal. These clubs have always played in England, and now there's the prospect of them never having a game against a Newcastle or a Burnley or a Palace ever again. It just seems all very, very odd, and it's difficult to sort of grasp about what the ramifications are going to be, because they're going to be so far-reaching if this goes ahead as it is intended.
We've been on our way towards this for probably 30 years now, probably since the incarnation of the Premier League in its current form, and then reforms to the Champions League with first the group stage, and then more recently with the rule that all four teams in Germany and Spain and Italy and England would qualify automatically for the group stage. These new reforms coming in now. We've been edging towards this for a long time, where the teams at the top create these conditions and these rules for themselves, and UEFA haven't been able to call their bluff, really. I think Miguel Delaney saying that Ceferin, the head of UEFA, had been strong-armed into these new Champions League reforms. But I think at some point the bluff had to be called, and now they've got no choice, UEFA, but to try and strike back as strongly as they can, because their competition is really on the line, and a lot of the major leagues in Europe are going to suffer a big hit if some of these major clubs leave the system.
I mean that's it. It's what you said before. The Super League breaking away, for example, is nothing new. I mean, this was being floated, as you said, in the last 30 years since the Premier League was in formation. But even before then, there were articles posted on social media from newspapers, speaking about, separating into Europe and creating sort of a top table. Um, but I think the sort of the core issue here is that it's essentially messing with the fabric of English football, which is, history, tradition, lots of years of family lineage and stories and experiences, and and it's kind of just been wiped away from under our feet. And I think that's sort of emotionally, that comes and hits you right in the gut straight away, because you think, as Joe said, I mean, it's very unlikely that, uh, I mean, just speaking in Premier League terms here, that the six clubs will be excluded. From my personal opinion, I don't see it happening from the Premier League. Um, but it just feels like, what's the point anymore? Because I was discussing this yesterday with Lewis Ambrose, um, and we spoke about, Arsenal in particular, and we said, what's the point of um, their domestic campaign? Because finishing between second and 17th, it's the same thing. And I'm really sad for that, because competition has essentially been etched out of football, which is ideally, is the main attraction for the sport, and what makes English football so exciting. Even though, yes, people will point to gross inequality across the four divisions and the pyramid, which is true. But yeah, for me, that issue of competition being stripped away is just a real sickener.
Yeah, I think the weird thing is people have been talking about, uh, you know, the current system as being bad and the Super League as being bad, but the current system can be reformed. It might not be functioning as intended now with inequalities within the footballing pyramid in the UK, but there are things that can be reformed, within the current structure. Not that they necessarily will be, because the inherent uh, capitalistic ways that is things that have created the Super League that still exist within the Premier League in its current form. But the Super League breaking away gives a massive, massive financial hit to the Premier League and the whole pyramid that will take a long time, I think, to recover from, if ever.
Yeah, I think that's probably one of the areas that we should probably discuss. And because it's something which hasn't happened before, but has constantly been floated as an idea, I think even if you're a club who are, for example, a Leicester City, you spend the best part of £200 million on a new training ground. And now the footballing pyramid, essentially, Florentino Perez and co have essentially come along and taken a big pair of scissors and just cut the top of the pyramid off. If it wasn't a huge gap that you had to bridge to compete with these teams financially, now it's now an absolute chasm. And I think, obviously all of these club owners who haven't been called up to the Super League, obviously they're all very wealthy, they're all very rich themselves. However, even from a fan's perspective, that there's always the promise of competition. Even if you're in the eighth tier, there's always the chance that you could cause an upset in a cup match, or you could go up through the leagues, and there's always that little tinge of hope. But now that just seems as though it's been cut off at the top. And I mean, the financial ramifications, I think, when you consider that the three clubs from Spain, Barça, Real, Atletico, in Italy, Juve, Inter, and Milan, and then the six English clubs. These are the global driving forces of why these leagues get big broadcast deals. So when you remove those, when those clubs remove themselves from the fabric of the game that we know, and sort of break off and think, we're going to do it ourselves because it benefits us. It is just such a brazen act of, we don't care about the rest. I mean, despite what they say in statements, we don't care about the rest of the game. This is purely from this benefits us standpoint. And I think there's so many, there's so many ramifications. I don't know. We can go on financial, we can go on competition. What do you want to get into?
Yeah, just on the financial, I've seen a lot of people kind of one angle that they've tried to justify this as saying, these are the clubs that generate all the revenue, so it's only natural that they want to go out and get their own. Um, but I think that's the first part where we miss a crucial step in that sport and football clubs. Then they should not be these financial vehicles and these businesses operated in the way they are as playthings of billionaires from all over the globe. These are social goods that are really crucial to building a community. They're so important to the lives of so many people in local communities. And yes, Liverpool has now become a global brand, but at its core, just using Liverpool as an example, but at its core, it's a key part of the fabric of the local community in Liverpool. So yeah, that's the first issue that I see with anyone trying to justify this system, is that essentially it's being removed from the community, and it's obvious that the Super League, it's a one step away from, soon we'll be hearing about Liverpool playing Real Madrid in New York or Los Angeles or somewhere like that. So you're really turning this local club into a global franchise, and I think that is just the number one no of this whole breakaway is cutting the ties of a social good from the community that it sprung from.
Yeah, football has been pure in a sense that it has been separate from the Americanization in a way of other sports. I mean, it's not a pure sport. We know that there's it has its edges. It's fair to say, but in terms of the competitive element, the promotion relegation element, the the fact that it's a low scoring game. There's lots of luck involved, and that can often sometimes play into the hands of the minnow, the little team. That's why we enjoy the game, because it's something that gives us pride in our region, in our area, where you come from, whether you have family ties from wherever. It's something that's always been there. For anybody who's around now, that football club has always been there. You only need to look at. I mean, I'll use Liverpool as an example again, but there's a reason that Anfield is plonked where it is in Liverpool. In next to Stanley Park, amongst all the houses. It would be naive of us to expect that over 150 years of financial evolution, that football clubs wouldn't evolve as well. But I think it to completely rip a club away from its roots, from the people who made it what it was, I think a part of the thing that irks me is that they're trying to do it under a guise of doing what's best for the game, and it's see through. It's so translucent, and you just it angers you. And to be clear, my football club isn't one of these breaking away, but you support football as much as you support your club in this sense, because it's one of those where you know that everything will change, and everything will be different. Phil, I don't know what your take is on, I mean, I couldn't put myself in your shoes, obviously being an Arsenal man, but what's your sort of your emotional feeling on sort of the decision that's been taken? Because we saw all of the things amidst the pandemic, the decisions to lay off however many staff, while there were, I mean, undoubtedly these conversations about Super League and getting millions and millions, hundreds of millions in revenue from this arrangement. It just also seems a bit hollow to me.
That's it. I mean, it's what you've both touched on already. There's within Arsenal. I mean, obviously, I'm just using them again as a specific example and from my experience. But there's a proud history and tradition of Arsenal helping the community. I mean, they've provided meals during the Corona crisis, and they've provided sort of soccer camps in half term to help parents who are maybe burdened by having to go to work and then pick up their children. They go into the community and teach a lot of children. Um, they provide not just sporting aid, but also financial aid for schools, and even beyond. They've set up like safe camps in Syria, in Africa, all and that makes me really proud to be involved, with a club like that, who always have the people in their thinking, and slowly you can feel that becoming eroded. And I'm not just going to go, oh, it's because of Stan Kroenke, blah blah blah. I think it's just a general pattern that we see across many top clubs. People are slowly becoming the afterthought, and the fans are slowly becoming the afterthought. And for me, I mean, we spoke about it before we came on the podcast. First of all, the statement was published onto Twitter at close to midnight, where a lot of eyes would not be seeing it, first of all. And the statement itself included no quotes from the Arsenal board or hierarchy or those involved in the discussions. Um, we had to read words from Manchester United board members and Liverpool board members, which is just it's insane to me, like genuinely insane. There's no transparency. There's no respect. Just a general acknowledgement that even though we are fans, we can understand the situation. And it was just a real sickener. I woke up in the morning and I felt really, with a big knot in my stomach, because it felt like I was slowly losing my grip on my club. And it sounds dramatic because a lot of people are just going to say, oh, it's nothing bad is going to happen. You're just playing Real Madrid once a year extra, and it's just like, well, it's not just that. I mean, that's the idea put forward. But it's what we've spoken about already. It's the trickle down effect for the rest of the Premier League and English football. And these ridiculous leaks about, we're going to improve VAR and put microphones on the referees and introduce a salary cap and help women's football. Like, when have they ever helped women's football? I mean, Liverpool and Manchester United, they have literally zero involvement in their women's sides. I mean, Manchester United didn't even have one until 2 years ago. It's all just, rubbish arguments to try and get people on side. But, there's just such a vast amount of money involved. So even if there is a salary cap put in place, for example, they're still going to be earning, hundreds of millions more than the next club. So they're going to be able to pay players, as they were before. It's just all rubbish. And I even saw a report from, I think it was Football Leagues, from one of the contracts that they managed to get their hands on, and it was an idea that no clubs within the Super League would be allowed to sign players from one another. And it's just, I mean, we were complaining about the lack of competition and making it a closed shop. I mean, that's the ultimate closed shop of all. They get to keep their assets, take assets from the smaller clubs, and it's just going to create an even larger division. So it's,
Well, I think what they want is, between the clubs themselves, is not to bid up wages. I think the whole idea here is, whether there's a salary cap or not introduced, is that this closed shop will, the club owners together will, kind of work together to deflate wages. So they'll be taking higher revenues, deflating wages, and ultimately pocketing bigger profits to reduce their debt. So I think that this whole idea of a salary cap potentially even like being considered as a good thing, it's not really a good thing. It's just a way for these teams to deflate wages and put more money in billionaire owners' pockets, and essentially take that money that's players are earning now and direct it into their own profits. So just the whole thing is kind of sick. I think from I think a lot of the English clubs, at least, I think it's a bit easier to pin the blame on owners that have put in, I think, a lot of hierarchy, people in their hierarchies that have worked towards this. But speaking from my experience as a Juventus fan, it's very strange for me how much of a driver of this the Agnelli was, because Juventus, I think a key problem is financial fair play. Has Juventus have a fair amount of debt, but Juventus's debt in the context of the Agnelli family's holdings, which are worth like over 100 billion euros or something like that. Juventus's debt is a drop in the ocean, but they're having clear issues with financial fair play, and whether that was one of the key reasons why Agnelli wanted to be one of the leaders of the push towards this new league, I don't know. But the Agnelli family are an intrinsic part of Juventus's history for 100 years or so, and so seeing such a key part of the club's history, then breaking them away from the Italian league and driving towards this franchise competition essentially is, it's kind of a bit sickening.
We see how instrumental these shadowy figures in suits at the very top of these clubs have been over the course of the last few months, clearly, which has now only just come out. And yet, across the board, no pun intended, we've had just blanket statements. As Phil, you were saying, you had a statement which was co-signed by Joel Glazer on the Arsenal website. This the decision makers, the people who've said yes, you know what, this is what's right for this club and these supporters. Um, they haven't fronted up and spoken out. I think Florentino Perez is the only one who's really come on the records, and I mean we'll get onto that in a second. But we saw last night at Elland Road where Jurgen Klopp had to face the cameras and essentially was put in an impossible situation where he'd previously been on the record to Kicker in 2019 saying that he would not be in favour of a Super League, and then his employers had gone completely over his head and that of the heads of his players in saying that we're going to do this. I think it's the fact that the interviews this morning were put on the Liverpool website and they were doctored in a sense to leave out the elements which discuss the Super League. I think it just shows how sort of evasive those at the top are, and I really do feel for the people who work for these, who support and work for these clubs, who work in the media department, who work in any aspect, the ticketing, people who are going to be fielding calls, who are going to be taking abuse from people. Who have no other vehicle for their anger, when realistically it is just a very, very select few at the very top, a select few billionaires who, as Steve, as you say, with the Agnellis, have been intrinsically linked with these clubs, whether that's be for a couple of years or a decade or for a century in Juve's case, that they're not having to front up and come out and say, what, this is us being accountable for our actions. It's very much we're essentially, we're going to do it anyway. We know that you're not going to be happy about it, but what can you do about it? What can you little people do? And it's just it kind of just it gets at the heart of
Yeah,
what makes it enjoyable.
these are the faceless men that control European football, essentially. 12 teams with 12 owners that, apart from, I guess, in Real Madrid and Barcelona's case, that's the technically owned by the members. But these are the people in control, and it just shows the complete disdain and disrespect they have for fans. When we even saw the leaks of them calling traditional match day going fans as legacy fans, and that they're focused on the fans of the future. It shows the disdain that they have for the traditional fans that have made these clubs such powerhouses. Like, people go to Anfield to see the Cop. The Cop is as much of a spectacle as what's happening on the field, and there's potential that those kind of things could fall apart, and then you kind of just left with a soulless on-field product that it might be exciting because you've got some incredible talent on display, but in the end it will just be soulless.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think it's important to know that football has never been perfect. UEFA have done a good job of portraying themselves as the sort of the Mother Teresa of football in the last couple of days, and they've been, been with the snakes comments, and obviously that might be true. I mean, we're not privy to the conversations, but they've hardly been a shining beacon for football in the last 30 years or so. And even FIFA, I mean, we have a World Cup in the winter in Qatar, for God's sake. So, I think them trying to play the moral high ground is quite rich, and I can understand people using this argument. I mean, even Sky, Gary Neville and Jamie Carragher were on there on Sunday and Monday, just criticizing everything and everybody in their path, but over the years they've been praising the likes of Roman Abramovich and Sheikh Mansour, who have come in from abroad and spent millions and billions of pounds, and they've put it down to ambition, and but I'm not sure exactly what they've done is any different to what's being proposed now. It's just different, in a group sense as opposed to an individual sense, and there's a lot of sort of I'm on my high horse kind of thing, but at the end of the day, people need to be working together, um, to try and, maybe obviously now it's too late to put a stop to it, but you know everybody needs to be banding together, and instead of even companies like Domino's, you know putting Arsenal and Tottenham fans, on blast in sort of smirky, tweets, that just brings out more tribalism in people, and that's not what needs to happen here. Everybody needs to be together, to try and minimize the damage here. And it's just the attitude for me, the general attitude. This whole we are saving football. We're intervening at a critical time, and people are losing interest in the game. I mean, their sole interest is money. Um, these clubs were billions in debt, and that was before the COVID crisis. And now, they're in debt up to their ears, and this is a way, plain and simple, is to protect their revenues and to secure consistent, cash flow. It's that simple, and I'm sure we'll go on to the big interview from El Chiringuito last night from Florentino Perez. But for him to say, it's not a closed league. There's only 15 teams involved, and then 5 teams can qualify afterwards, and it's just like, how stupid do you think people are? It's just really insulting, and these conversations have taken place in the shadows during a global pandemic when no fans have been allowed into stadiums. They've never felt more excluded or uninvolved from their clubs, and they've just been plotting away in the back. And now they're going to come out and say, like, oh, it's the best, where we have the best interests of football at heart. And, it's just all rubbish. They just simply want to close themselves off. They want to secure their own futures and their own cash revenues, and everyone else, it's down to you to fend for yourselves. So,
it's funny. It's funny that people like Perez are talking about these massive debts and whatever, but it's like these debts were unavoidable. Yes, the pandemic has impacted revenues, but as you said, even before the pandemic, these clubs were in massive amounts of debt, and it's because of things like signing Eden Hazard for £100 million as a 29-year-old and giving him monster wages. It's because Juventus have signed Ronaldo for £100 million as a 33-year-old and paying him €60 million a season. It's like these people, are kind of shifting the blame of their own debt onto others, and now, yeah, the whole thing is, you're not guaranteed to make the final or win the Champions League every season and bag the huge amounts of revenue that entails. You might, in some cases like Arsenal and Man United or Spurs might be missing the Champions League, and that's a massive knock to your bottom line. So, businesses love to run without any kind of operational risk. Businesses love certainty, and there's no better certainty than a league you can never be relegated from, and you could never lose the revenue share from. But yeah, it's so disingenuous.
Yeah, and we were discussing there, Phil. You were saying there about Florentino Perez's interview with El Chiringuito, and I think it's probably wise to just refer to some of the quotes that he said in that interview. So Perez, who's obviously the chief of Real Madrid, said big clubs in England, Italy, and Spain have to find a solution to a very bad situation. When you don't have income beyond TV, the only way to make it profitable is to play more competitive, attractive games that fans around the world can see. Football has to evolve like businesses, people do in life. Football has to change for the times we live in. Football has been losing interest. Audiences are dropping. Audio-visual rights are dropping. Something had to be done. The pandemic said we had to do it now. I mean, it's just very brazen, because I keep using the word, but it's true. We've discussed the fact that there's nobody in stadiums, as Phil said. Fans have never felt more excluded, and yet this was in the statement that was very non-committal, but made pains to state that it was to do with the pandemic. And now they're referring to that in interviews, in PR stunts. I just I really don't like it. I'm at a loss for sort of more poignant words. And Steve, you're one for this. You are very much our Gary Neville on Scouted, as you wrote your editorial piece yesterday, which was great. But I really I'm just at a loss as to sort of the goal that it just all feels very.
Well,
Yeah.
a key problem was that the TV rights deals that were all signed in the mid 2010s, they were just massively inflated, and they were always going to drop down. So that's a key problem, is basing your revenues on, always increasing revenues in a business don't always increase. So you need to assess for risk, and the possibility that the amount of money you make next year might not be as high as the amount of money you make this year. So that's key issue number one. Um, and with TV rights deals, I hope that governments really step in, and this could be the first step in giving the sport back to the fans. Is I think governments need to step in and regulate games being on free to air television. In Australia, we have anti siphoning laws, they're called, that legislate that certain sporting events must be shown on free to air television, like the Olympic Games, always on free to air television. All test matches that feature Australia, all World Cup matches, and the World Cup final have to be on free to air television. So I think step one could just be some sort of anti-siphoning laws in the UK that's stipulate that a certain number of Premier League matches and Champions League matches every week featuring English clubs have to be featured on free to air television, and go from there. I think it's we need to think of solutions with fans in mind, because for too long in our sport, uh, where the money has been the driver of decisions, and now we need to hopefully see that this crisis uh, puts the fan perspective back front and center of administrative decisions in the sport.
I mean, I'm personally looking at it from a very English sort of micro lens, because this is what I know and what I've grown up with. I mean, I wasn't alive when the Premier League was formed in 1992, so what I'm experiencing now is what I've known my whole life. Um, and obviously, not just English fans, but many fans across the world will feel aggrieved by this, and they understand why we feel aggrieved by this. But there's also millions of people who will be interested in what they have to offer. I mean, let's not kid ourselves. This will be popular, and this will be a success um, across the world, because let's say the more casual fan, um, who maybe isn't so dedicated into the 24/7 ongoing of football, will be flicking through the channels and, oh, Liverpool against Barcelona's on tonight, let's whack that on, and that appeals to a lot of people and to millions of people. So that's why there's an added layer of helplessness involved. I mean, I'm sure for myself and many other people, because what am I supposed to do now? I mean, I'm completely against what's happening, but I can't just drop 25 years of my association and emotion attached to Arsenal. Do I just stop watching them now? I mean, fair play. People that can do that, they are, they have my respect, because I can't. I already know that I can't, and I'm going to still watch the games, because it's my club and it's the club that I love. But I'm kind of, there's no way out for me, and that's a layer of sadness that I feel within this whole situation, because as much as I dislike what's happening, as much as I despise the attitude and the sort of sound bites that are coming from people involved within this, I'm still a slave to it all at the end of the day, and I'm still going to be watching the games, because it's my club and it's the club that I love. So it's just it's just a general feeling of helplessness, and you feel very sort of small and uninvolved as a fan, because we've had no say in the decision making process. We haven't been consulted in any way. They've kind of just got together amongst themselves, sat down, found out what's best for their interests, and gone forward with it. So um, it's very, I mean, using another personal example, Arsenal are in the European semi-final, uh, and I was actually in a terrible season for the club personally. I've been really excited with this because it's a semi-final, a chance to win some silverware. We play um, Villarreal, who are managed by Unai Emery, so that's an added layer of interest and spice to the game. And now it's just like, well, does it mean anything? I don't know. I don't really feel like it means anything, because I just know in a couple of years that my club are going to be guaranteed 350 million, regardless of what they do in the league. And it's just like, well, okay, I guess there's some silverware on the line, and potentially beating Man United, uh, or the prospect of facing Manchester United if we both win our prospective semi-finals. But it's just, it just feels a bit pointless at the moment, and that makes me really sad, because I love knowing that my team have achieved something on merit, and they've earned their silverware, or they've earned their position. And now it just doesn't feel like that at all for me, which is really sad.
I'm still kind of hopeful that some way or somehow someone can kill this. I think I kind of read some things about Keir Starmer saying he'd be happy to support any legislation that the UK government might bring forward to regulate club ownership, or do something of that ilk. You've got potentially players banding together and taking a stand against the new competition. You got managers as well, probably a little bit less powerful, but in that sense, though, I was a little bit disappointed by the FIFA Pro statement, the players' union statement in regards to the Super League. I thought it was a little bit weak, but I think we've already seen things from James Milner spoke really well in a post game interview last night. We've seen dribs and drabs on social media from Bruno Fernandes and Ander Herrera. So fingers crossed we see some more players take those steps as well, because there's a lot at stake for them, with potential barring from international tournaments and the like. So yeah, I am still hopeful, but it's very much wait and see now. I think there's going to be a lot of litigation in European courts, and yeah, this is going to be a long and drawn out process.
Get 20% off and free delivery with the code SCOUTED20 at manscaped.com. That's 20% off with free delivery at manscaped.com. Use code SCOUTED20. Your balls will thank you. Yeah, I think it's probably best that we discuss sort of what the future could potentially look like in that case then. And going through all the scenarios in my head, I was thinking, well, how does it work? Do these legacy leagues, if you will, do they still exist in the same form with these teams breaking away? So in a hypothetical situation where these teams do break off, you 5-10 years down the line, say for example you're a player, I think obviously in the same way that they are now, but even in a more pronounced fashion, the best players will only be siphoned towards the big clubs and at a faster rate. Would you rather play for a team beneath the Super League or for a Super League's academy or B team, who can offer you just so much more, because they're just the resources they have are just so much more incredible. How long would it be until Super League B teams are dropping into these legacy divisions, dropping into the Premier League, but without the prospect of promotion, and sort of diluting the competitive aspect even further? Because you have to look at sort of there'll be these Super League academies. Are they going to all play each other? Because then is it going to be the same? Is it going to be sort of a UEFA Super League, Super Youth League? There are of things here that I think have been sort of put on the table and just glossed over because they've seen the check and thought, well, yes, this is a very good idea. We should push forward with this without actually sort of taking into consideration that everything in the game is affected by this. Transfers. What are transfers going to look like? When clubs are when Super League clubs are just cherry picking players from from teams in leagues beneath them. If they can do this is the one thing that I always keep coming back to is if they can do this and they can break away from the leagues, who's to say that they can be stopped from doing literally whatever they want?
Yeah, I think that's the first thing I thought about when I heard that players could potentially be barred from competing in international tournaments or playing for their national teams is what's going to stop the Super League from forming their own version of a World Cup or their own version of a Euros. It sounds ridiculous, but as you said, what can't these people do? And they're going to be in control of such a large pool of money now that um, what's going to stop them from saying, hey, you don't really get paid a whole lot by your national federation. What if we give you X amount of money to, defect to your Super League nation and play in some, copy World Cup or copied Euro? Yeah, the possibilities are endless for how these people can take control, given the amount of money they have and how much money dictates what happens in 21st century society.
Yeah, because money has got us to this point, and there is only going to be a proliferation of it in the Super League. So how could the statements that Perez has made make any sense that it would make the game better by pumping yet more money into it? It all just seems very sour. I think we'll bring this one to a close for this week before we sort of go into all the hypothetical scenarios, as we'll be here all day. But Phil, Steve, thank you very much for joining me. Do you have any sort of parting comments before we close this one off?
No, no. I mean, for me personally, it's what we said. Nobody knows what's going to happen, and people might be thinking, "Oh, you're afraid of change, and this was always going to happen," and they could be absolutely right. I mean, that's entirely fair, and maybe these clubs will get together and actually sort of go along with their word and funnel money into clubs who aren't involved in the Super League and take an interest in women's football and things like that. Maybe they will. I mean, there's no way of us knowing. Um, but I'm just reacting purely from the last 48 hours and how it feels to be a fan of one of the clubs involved and just in sort of with the sentiment of English football in general. And I think I agree that change was inevitable. This is a very drastic one, and I don't know if this was the best way to handle things. And that for me is the gut punch, the fact that it's been very secret, very behind the scenes, no fans consulted. There's been a general lack of um, respect and acknowledgement from these guys that um, we don't know what's going on. We're the ones that are in the wrong because we don't see the bigger picture. And I genuinely believe that this could be a really bad thing, not just for English football, um, and not just English football, but for European football as well. And I think if they don't get a lot of things right, it could be really catastrophic. And I don't want to see my club playing in the Club World Cup in, uh, for like you mentioned before, in New York or Thailand or wherever they go, because I think it's basically one step away from that. And I think, as I said before, people can accuse me of being scared of change, and they can absolutely say that. That's perfectly valid. But I just think there's a lot of posturing that's disingenuous from those um, upstairs, shall we say, and they kind of just feel like they can do whatever they want now because the contracts are signed and that's it. This is happening whether we agree with it or not, and that's quite a horrible feeling for me, which is basically where I stand on it at the moment. So we just have to wait and see what happens, I guess.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, global corporations basically control, most aspects of our lives, but football, it isn't different, but it should be, and fans should take this opportunity to continue pushing back on this as much as possible. Use your voice as much as you can to oppose this, and the chances of it not going ahead or of destroying it are slim. But football is so important to our lives, so important to the communities that these clubs exist in, and the nations in which they compete in, that we really have to try and not just end this, but I think also really come down hard on these mutinous clubs that are trying to create a law unto themselves, which they have been doing for the last 30 plus years, but are really gunning for it now. So yeah, keep doing your thing to all the supporter trusts out there, and yeah, just fight it as much as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you haven't checked out Steve's piece on our website, his editorial on the Super League, and echoing all of our thoughts at Scouted about what it means for the future of the game that we know and love, then do check that out. As I mean, it resonated with myself. I know it resonated with Phil, and I'm sure it would resonate with anybody else who's agreed with some of our points on this podcast. That's all from us this week. We'll be back hopefully next week with perhaps some resolution on this issue, but fingers crossed, but not holding our breath, I think it's fair to say. But yeah, thank you very much for tuning in. This has been the Scouted Football Podcast with me, Joe Donoghue, and Stephen Ganavis and Phil Costa. Stay safe, take care, bye for now.